The wind howled like a ghost across the plains, dry and sharp, whistling through the skeletal trees that bordered the outskirts of Grey Hollow. Snow lay in stubborn patches against the rocks, the last breaths of winter still clinging to the land. Inside a weather-worn forge, Elijah Boone stood before the dying embers of his fire, hammer hanging loose in his hand, breath rising in misty tendrils. 12 winters had passed since he'd last spoken more than a few words to another soul. 12 winters of silence, iron, and penance. He lived in the forge behind the main street, where no one cared to venture. Folks respected Eli's quiet. Some feared him, others pitied him. None knew him. That was just fine by him. His hands were made for shaping metal, not holding people. He'd lost the right to that long ago, but that night, something shifted. As thunder rolled over the darkening hills, a faint sound broke through the storm. A knock, then another, sharp, rapid, urgent. Eli's brow furrowed. He hadn't heard that sound in years. Gripping the handle of his hammer, he moved slowly to the heavy oak door and opened it. A girl stood there, no more than 13, soaked through with rain and snowmelt. Her long brown hair clung to her face, her dress torn at the hem. In her arms, she clutched a bundle wrapped in frayed blankets. The bundle whimpered. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, voice trembling. Eli looked at her, then the bundle. "That a baby?" She nodded, tightening her grip. "He's my brother." "Please, sir." Eli hesitated. Everything in him screamed to shut the door. He didn't do people, didn't do problems. Yet there she was, small, desperate, soaked to the bone, and holding more than just a child. She held something he'd buried deep. The memory of another small voice long silenced. He stepped aside. "Get in." She shuffled inside, nearly stumbling. The forge smelled of coal, metal, and loneliness. She didn't seem to mind. Kneeling by the fire, she peeled back the blanket just enough to reveal the baby's flushed cheeks and sleepy eyes. "What's your name?" Eli asked. "Clara," she said. "His name's Thomas." Eli nodded once, slowly. "I ain't got much. No food for kids." "No milk. We'll manage." He stared at her, the flicker of something old igniting in his chest, something dangerously close to care. Before we find out who this girl is and why she's knocking on the blacksmith's door, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more gripping frontier tales. There's more to this story than meets the eye, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Outside, the storm thickened. Inside, the blacksmith stared at the children who had stumbled into his solitude. Something had broken, just slightly, in the walls he'd built over 12 long winters. Clara didn't say much at first. She sat close to the fire, rubbing her hands to warm them, while little Thomas nuzzled against her chest. Eli watched from a distance, his back to the wall, arms crossed. He wasn't a man used to company and certainly not children, but he didn't send them away. "You got family nearby?" he asked. Clara shook her head. "No, sir." Eli grunted. "Where you from, then?" She hesitated. "East. We traveled a while. Had to leave." "Why?" Clara looked down at her boots. One of them had a hole near the toe. It wasn't safe no more. Eli didn't press. Something in her voice, and flat, measured, told him there were things she wasn't ready to say. He recognized that tone. He'd used it himself once, long ago, to keep people from asking questions that didn't have clean answers. He moved to the corner and fetched an old wool blanket, tossing it to her without a word. She caught it, wrapped Thomas tighter, and whispered a soft thank you. "You hungry?" "A little." He didn't have much. Dried beans, some bread gone tough, salted pork from last week. He set a small plate beside her. She waited until he stepped back before eating. Eli sat at the edge of his cot, rubbing his temples. He'd lived alone for so long the silence had become a comfort. Now every little sound, the baby's whimper, the girl's soft breathing, made him uneasy. Clara ate slowly. "You live here alone?" "For a while now." "No wife?" He shook his head. "No kids?" Eli's jaw tightened. "Not anymore." Silence hung in the air like smoke. Clara nodded, not asking more. That was when he noticed her hands, red, raw from cold and work, too small to be so worn. "You always look after him?" he asked. "Since he was born." "How old's he?" 8 months. "Maybe 9. Eli glanced at the bundle. The baby blinked up at the ceiling, a tiny fist clenched near his cheek. "You got a plan?" Clara looked at him then. Her eyes, though young, carried weight, like someone who'd seen too much too soon. "Find someplace quiet, where no one knows us." He didn't respond. What could he say? That place didn't exist, not for people who ran. That night, after the fire dimmed and Clara drifted to sleep with Thomas in her arms, Eli sat awake. He stared at the anvil in the center of the room, blackened and still warm. For the first time in years, the silence inside him cracked. He didn't trust her. Not yet. But something about the way she held that child, fierce and fragile all at once, stirred memories best left buried. He told himself he'd let them stay one night. Just one. But he already knew he was lying. The next morning broke cold and grey. Smoke drifted lazily from Eli's forge chimney as he stepped outside, axe in hand, to chop wood. The night had passed quiet, but his thoughts hadn't. Every creak of the rafters, every cry from the baby had kept him sharp, uneasy. He wasn't used to that anymore. Inside, Clara stirred. She'd wrapped herself and Thomas in the blanket, keeping him close, shielding him from drafts. When Eli returned, she was already sweeping the floor with a worn broom he didn't even remember owning. "You don't have to do that," he muttered. "I want to." He nodded, unsure what else to say. By mid-morning, the forge had warmed enough for Eli to start on a wagon wheel someone from town had left weeks ago. Clara sat quietly in the corner, rocking Thomas in her lap, watching him work. She didn't ask questions. That was rare. Then came the sound of hooves. A rider, tall, lean, with a grey coat dusted in trail dirt, pulled up outside the forge. Eli stepped out, wiping sweat from his brow. "Morning," the stranger called, voice smooth but distant. "I'm looking for a girl, about yay high, might be carrying a baby." Eli's jaw tensed. "Ain't seen anyone like that." The rider nodded slowly, eyes scanning the forge behind him. "You sure?" "I said what I said." A beat passed before the man tipped his hat. "Well then." "Apologies." Eli watched him ride off toward town, his posture never relaxing until the dust settled. When he turned back, Clara was pale. "You know him?" he asked. She nodded. "He's one of them." Eli didn't press. She wasn't ready. But the look in her eyes, wide, frightened, told him everything he needed. "Who's them?" Clara looked away. "People who think we don't belong anywhere." That night after supper, Eli noticed her sharpening a small knife with deliberate care. The blade wasn't much, a kitchen thing barely 4 inches, but she held it like it mattered. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked. She kept her eyes on the edge. "Mama showed me, said a blade's a girl's best chance in the dark." Eli didn't argue. Thomas whimpered. Clara scooped him up and whispered something soft, pressing her forehead to his. The baby settled almost instantly. Eli turned away. That tenderness, raw and instinctive, stirred something old in him, something hollowed by time. Later, Sheriff Doyle stopped by, boots crunching on frozen earth. Eli stepped out to meet him. "You get a visitor today?" Doyle asked. "Ryder." "Didn't give a name. He asked the same in town. Folks didn't like the look of him, said he rode west after." Eli nodded once. "I'll keep an eye out." As the sheriff rode off, Eli stood in the dusk, his breath fogging in the air. Trouble had sniffed its way to his door. He didn't know the whole story, but he knew enough. The forge glowed red with heat, the air thick with smoke and sparks. Eli hammered steel with deliberate rhythm, but his mind wasn't in it. Every strike echoed louder than it should, clanging off the walls and through the memories he'd spent years trying to bury. In the corner, Clara fed Thomas bits of mashed beans with her fingers. The boy gurgled happily, oblivious to the weight pressing down around them. Eli glanced at them and then back to the iron. That rider hadn't come alone. Men like that never did. And if Clara was right, more would come. He paused mid-swing, staring at the steel. Once he'd carried guns instead of hammers. Once he'd been a man others feared, a name whispered in saloons and jails. Then he buried that life, and with his daughter, he set the hammer down. Later that day he walked behind the forge, past the leaning fence where weeds grew wild. A low mound of earth rested beneath a lone pine tree, marked only by a wooden cross worn smooth by time. He knelt there, touching the earth. "I promised her," he muttered. "No more blood, no more fire." But even as he said it, he knew the world didn't care for promises. Inside, Clara was folding what little laundry they had, humming softly to calm Thomas. Eli stepped in, dirt still on his knees. "You need to tell me the truth now," he said. Clara looked up, startled. "Who are they? Why are they after you?" Clara's voice was low, steady. "They were part of a group, called themselves the Circle of Grace, lived out past the ridges. My parents joined when I was little." Eli stiffened. He'd heard rumors about mountain folk like that. Isolated, strict, dangerous. Clara continued. "Mama saw through them. Papa tried to leave with us. They didn't let him." "What happened?" Clara's eyes hardened. "We ran. Took Thomas and ran. Mama said never to look back." Eli sat heavily. "That man, the rider. He's one of them?" She nodded. "They think Thomas is theirs, born into their grace. They'll come for him." Eli rubbed his face. "You should have kept running." "I couldn't. He was sick. Fever. I thought—" Her voice cracked. "I thought he'd die. Then I saw the forge. I saw the fire. I thought maybe you'd help." Silence stretched between them. "You picked the wrong man," he said quietly. Clara stared at him. "No, I didn't." He turned away, unsure what burned more, the heat of the forge or the weight of her trust. That night, Eli cleared out the back room, found an old rifle wrapped in oilcloth, loaded it, checked the sights. It felt foreign in his hands, like shaking hands with a ghost. He lit the lantern, walked to the door, and bolted it shut behind him. Some part of him had already decided. Eli knew he couldn't do it alone. He needed eyes in town, ears for whispers, hands that knew how to help without asking too many questions. So he went to Rosie. The widow Kemp ran the dry goods store on Main. Folks remembered her from the saloon days, but no one questioned her grit. She was sharp, respected, and, more importantly, owed Eli a favor from years back. "I need a place for the girl and the baby," he said, keeping his voice low. Rosie raised an eyebrow. "A girl and a baby? You going soft on me, Boone?" "Not soft, just aware. Trouble's coming." Rosie set down the ledger she'd been scribbling in. "Tell me what you need." By sundown, Clara and Thomas were bundled into Rosie's spare room above the shop. Clara hesitated to leave the forge, but Eli promised to check in. "Rosie'll keep you safe for now. I'll handle the rest." Back at the forge, Eli began preparations. Reinforced the door, patched holes in the roof, laid old bear traps along the rear path. Every nail he hammered echoed with a strange calm. The calm of a man who'd made his choice. In town, the talk grew louder. Some said strange men were seen camped near the ravine. Others claimed they saw a preacher with eyes like glass, preaching to shadows. Eli listened, but said little. Meanwhile, Clara was finding a rhythm with Rosie. The older woman showed her how to make stew from scraps, how to fold linens, how to silence a crying baby with a gentle bounce and a well-placed hum. "You ever feel safe here?" Clara asked one evening, holding Thomas close. Rosie smiled. "Safe is a funny word. You don't wait for it. You build it." That night, while Rosie swept downstairs, a group passed through town, 3 men and a wagon. One bore the mark of the Circle of Grace, a silver brooch shaped like a flame. They didn't ask questions. Just stared too long at windows, too long at Rosie's shop. Eli saw them too. He kept to the shadows, watching, measuring. One of the men had a rifle strapped to his back. Another wore preacher's robes. He went to Doyle. "They're not here for trade," Eli said. The sheriff scratched his beard. "I don't like it, but they ain't broken no laws, not yet." "Then we wait," Eli replied, voice flat. That night, Clara tucked Thomas in and sat by the window. Her fingers traced the edge of the knife Rosie had given her, longer than the one she'd had before, sharper too. She saw Eli in the distance, standing alone in front of the forge, lantern flickering by his side. He didn't wave, didn't move, but she knew he was watching. In the hills beyond town, a fire burned. Around it men whispered prayers that sounded like threats. It came without warning just after midnight. The wind had quieted, the moon low and pale, when the first crack of a gunshot shattered the stillness. Eli was already awake. He'd been waiting. Another shot, closer. Glass broke. A scream. Eli grabbed his rifle and moved, fast but measured. He burst through the forge door and into the night, eyes adjusting to the flickering chaos. Rosie's shop was ablaze, the lower windows shattered. Clara was on the upper balcony, clutching Thomas, her face lit by firelight. "Clara!" he shouted. A man appeared below, rifle raised. Eli didn't think and he pulled the trigger. The shot caught the attacker in the shoulder, spinning him back into the dirt. Eli didn't wait to see if he'd rise. He sprinted to the back alley, heart pounding, each step a memory of battles past. A second man lunged from the shadows, blade drawn. Eli blocked with the stock of his rifle, then drove his fist into the man's gut, knocking him cold. "Hold on," he yelled up to Clara. She didn't hesitate. Wrapping Thomas tight in a blanket, she climbed onto the railing. Without a word, she jumped. Eli caught her hard, staggered back, held them both. Another shot rang out. Wood splintered near his feet. "We move now." They ran, back through the alley, into the shadows behind the forge. Eli bolted the rear door, breath ragged, sweat freezing on his neck. Clara was crying but silent. Thomas whimpered, scared but safe. "They knew," she whispered. "They knew where we were." Eli knelt beside her. Someone talked, or someone watched. Doesn't matter now. A thud against the front door, then another. He grabbed his revolver from the workbench, handed Clara a loaded pistol. Her hands shook. "You know how to use it." She nodded. "You shoot to end it, you hear me?" She nodded again, jaw clenched. The next hour was hell. They came in waves. Men with torches, with knives, with shouts about judgment and fire. Eli fought like a man born to violence. Every blow, every shot was precise, brutal, and final. Clara stayed low, protecting Thomas, but when one man broke through a side window, she screamed and threw boiling water from a kettle. He dropped screaming, clawing at his face. Another burst in behind him. She stabbed him in the leg, then kicked him back outside. Eli turned just in time to see it. "You all right?" he called. Clara nodded, face pale but fierce. He didn't touch the baby. Smoke filled the forge. The attackers pulled back, retreating into the dark. Someone shouted for a retreat. The fire had spread. Eli kicked open the rear exit, led them out, coughing and half blind. They didn't stop until they reached the old barn near the creek. There, in the cold silence, Clara cradled Thomas and whispered, "He almost got him." Eli didn't answer. He was staring at the rifle in his hands and the blood on the barrel. They left before dawn with nothing but what they could carry. The forge was lost, Rosie's shop burned. Grey Hollow had fallen silent again, as if the fire had swallowed every sound. Eli led them west into the hills, along a narrow trail known to few. Clara followed close, Thomas strapped tight to her chest. The baby had barely slept, and neither had she. But she didn't complain, she didn't cry, she walked. They moved through pine and frost, past twisted rocks and frozen streams. Eli barely spoke, eyes scanning every ridge. He knew the way to the valley, knew where Crane's people were hiding. Clara asked once, "Why there?" Eli didn't turn. "Because that's where it ends." They camped near the edge of a ravine that night. Clara gathered sticks while Eli lit a fire with flint. Thomas whimpered, cold and hungry, but there was no milk, no stew, just hard bread and silence. "Will we make it?" Clara asked. Eli didn't answer right away. "I've seen worse odds." That wasn't comfort, but it was truth. Later, wolves howled in the distance. Clara huddled near the fire, rocking Thomas gently. Eli sat across from her, cleaning his rifle. The light caught the scar on his temple, a jagged line that spoke of old violence. Was your daughter like me? Clara asked suddenly. Eli didn't flinch. She had your fire, quieter maybe, but strong. What happened? He stared into the flames. There was a man. He came through town once, preached about redemption, said he could heal people. She was sick and I was desperate. Clara didn't interrupt. He lied. She got worse. He vanished. He paused. I tracked him down, did what I had to do. But it didn't bring her back. Clara looked at him, eyes full of something deeper than sympathy. You think helping me makes up for it? Eli shook his head. No. But it's something I can do, right? A long silence followed, broken only by the crackle of fire and the soft sighs of sleeping Thomas. Then Clara shifted closer. I don't remember much before we ran, she said. But Mama used to sing to him, said her voice kept the dark away. Why'd you stop? I didn't think it mattered. Eli glanced at her. Maybe it still does. She nodded slowly, then began to hum, a quiet, broken tune that wavered in the cold. Thomas stirred, then settled. Eli closed his eyes. The firelight cast shadows across the trees. Somewhere beyond, past the next ridge, the valley waited, and with it the man who'd sent monsters into the night. But for now, they sat in peace. Just 3 figures in the wilderness, surrounded by stars and silence. Eli didn't believe in redemption. Not really, but he believed in Clara, and he wasn't turning back. The valley opened beneath them like a wound in the land. Steep cliffs on both sides, tall pines swaying above weathered cabins and crooked tents. Smoke rose from campfires. Men moved in shadows, and in the center, standing before a crude altar of stones, was Reverend Josiah Crane. Eli watched through a spyglass, hidden high in the ridge. That's him, he muttered. That's who sent them. Clara sat beside him, Thomas asleep against her. What do we do now? We get close. We wait for the right moment. By dusk, they descended through a dry ravine into the edge of the compound. They crept behind a storage shack, listening to chants echo through the valley, soft, strange, rhythmic. Crane's voice rose above them all, calm and smooth as oil. Fire cleanses. Fire redeems. We are born again in ash. Eli's hands clenched around his rifle. Suddenly, footsteps. They ducked low. A young boy, no older than 10, walked past carrying firewood. His eyes were glassy, empty. Clara touched Eli's sleeve. They got children in there, he nodded. I know. They waited until the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed. That's when Rosie screamed. Clara froze. Rosie? Her voice cracked and Eli's stomach sank. He grabbed the spyglass again. Near the altar, flanked by guards, Rosie stood bound and bloodied. Crane's hand hovered above her head, a Bible in the other. She harbored fugitives, he declared. She defied the grace of fire. Clara lunged forward. Eli caught her. We can't yet. They'll kill her. I know. But if we move too soon... Another voice cut through the dusk. She's not alone. A man stepped from the shadows. One Eli recognized from town. Ben Weller. He'd sold them out. Eli's jaw tightened. That son of a... He followed us, Clara whispered. Rosie looked out into the trees, eyes searching, pleading. Crane smiled. We will offer her redemption, but first, bring me the girl. Bring me the child. The guards moved. Eli knew time had run out. Back behind the shack, he looked at Clara. This is the end of the road. You sure you're ready? Clara nodded. We've come this far. I'll draw them. You get Rosie. What about Thomas? He hesitated, then removed his coat. Strap him to me. I'll keep him safe. As they readied themselves, Crane raised his arms again. The fire will speak, but something shifted, a crack in the chant, an uncertainty in the crowd. Eli stepped into the open, rifle aimed high, voice steady. You want fire? He called out. You'll have it. Crane turned, smile fading. Elijah Boone, he said. I knew you'd come. Eli didn't answer. His eyes locked on Rosie, on Clara's trembling form behind the crates, on the guards already reaching for their weapons. One wrong move, and the whole valley would burn. The first shot split the valley. Eli's bullet tore through the shoulder of the nearest guard, sending him spinning into the dust. Chaos erupted. Screams, shouted orders, scattered footsteps. Eli moved like a storm, rifle cracking, eyes locked on Rosie. "Go!" he shouted. Clara dashed from cover, knife drawn, heart pounding like a war drum. Rosie was still tied, bruised but alive. Clara sliced the ropes, blood on her hands, not hers, but someone's. She didn't stop to look. Behind them, Eli fought like a man possessed. Another zealot lunged. Eli clubbed him with the rifle's butt, then fired point blank at a second. Every movement was brutal, efficient, final. Rosie stumbled. Clara grabbed her arm. "We have to run!" From the altar, Crane watched, face calm even as his men fell. He raised his hands and called out, "This is the devil's work. The girl is temptation. The child is falsehood." Clara spun toward him, fury in her eyes. "He's my brother." Crane's eyes narrowed. "He's prophecy." Eli turned just in time to see a blade glint behind him, but Doyle appeared from nowhere, firing 2 clean shots. The attacker dropped. "You picked a hell of a time," Eli said. "Figured you could use a hand," the sheriff replied, blood on his sleeve, breathing hard. They pushed forward. Clara helped Rosie behind a wagon. Eli advanced toward Crane, gun raised, but then he stumbled. A sharp crack. His side burst with pain. He looked down. Blood. Clara screamed. Eli dropped to one knee, gritting his teeth. He fired anyway, hit a guard in the leg. Another in the chest, but Crane was moving now, slipping toward the back of the altar, shouting more scripture. Clara didn't wait. She stepped into the open, grabbed Eli's revolver from his belt and ran toward Crane. He turned, smug and slow. "Even now, child." She didn't flinch. "This ends now." Crane reached for something, a blade, a book, she didn't know. She fired. The shot echoed clean and final. Crane dropped to the dirt, hands spread, eyes wide in disbelief. The crowd froze. For the first time, no one spoke. Sheriff Doyle moved to Eli's side, helping him to stand. "You all right?" "I'll live." Clara stood over Crane's body, hand trembling, tears burning down her face. Rosie came up behind her, wrapped her arms around both her and Thomas. "It's over," she whispered, but Clara shook her head. "Not yet." The compound was scattered. The zealots fled or dropped their weapons. Some knelt, praying in silence. Others vanished into the trees. Eli limped toward Clara, blood soaking through his shirt. "You did good." She looked at him. "You didn't stop me." "I wouldn't dare." The fire that had threatened to consume them now smoldered in the dirt. Not from vengeance, but something else. Survival, defiance, a final stand. Spring came late that year. The snow melted slow, revealing scorched earth and broken timber where the compound once stood. Most of Crane's followers vanished into the wild. Others returned to the towns they'd once fled. The circle of grace was gone. Eli spent 3 weeks in Rosie's care. The bullet wound had gone deep, but not fatal. Clara watched over him each night. Thomas curled against her side, the revolver always within reach. "I should have shot sooner," she said one morning. Eli looked at her. "You waited just long enough." By April, the forge had been rebuilt. Smaller now, with new timber but steady. The anvil stood where it always had. Clara helped mix mortar. Rosie painted the front door red. "For luck," she said. Doyle stopped by on occasion, still limping from a cracked rib. He left a deputy in charge now and then just to sit a spell and talk with Eli. "I never thought you'd take root again," he said. Eli chuckled. "Didn't think I'd live long enough to get shot again." Clara and Thomas lived with Rosie for a time, but most afternoons were spent at the forge. Clara swept, fetched water, fed the bellows. Thomas crawled across the floor, babbling at sparks like they were stars. "You're training her?" Doyle asked one day. Eli nodded. "She's already tougher than I ever was." By summer, laughter echoed through the forge. Not the kind forced or polite, but real. The kind Eli hadn't heard since before his daughter died. Clara would laugh when Thomas tried to eat coal. Rosie would laugh when Eli grumbled about burnt bread. Even Eli had started smiling more. One afternoon, Clara stood by the fire, watching the metal glow. "You ever feel like maybe this was supposed to happen?" Eli looked up. "You think fate brought you to my door?" "I think something did, and I think you needed us as much as we needed you." He didn't answer, just nodded. That night, Eli walked alone to the pine tree behind the forge. The cross was still there. He knelt beside it. "I kept the promise, Em," he said softly. "No more running. No more hiding." He placed a tiny horseshoe beside the grave. Thomas's first, shaped by Clara's hand. As the sun set, the valley bathed in gold. Eli walked back to the forge. Clara and Thomas waited on the steps, Rosie humming an old lullaby in the doorway. And for the first time in 12 winters, he wasn't alone. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and stay with us for more tales from the old frontier. And don't forget, there's another unforgettable story waiting for you right now. Just click the video on your screen and keep riding with us through the Wild West, because every fire leaves ashes, and sometimes, from those ashes, something better is forged.